Okay, so a very good morning to everybody, or good afternoon if some people are out of the same time zone. I have my microphone on, but I am, just so you can see what I look like, but I will actually turn it off because I think it's probably better because of the bandwidth. So please feel free to interrupt me if you can't hear me. Hopefully everybody can hear me well. So thank you very much for coming to this webinar. It's always a great pleasure for me to talk on African swine fever virus. I've worked on the virus for most of my career. I was at the Institute for Animal Health, which was and is now the Pirbright Institute for many years. I did my PhD on African swine fever virus. I then I then was in charge of the African swine fever virus OIE reference laboratory for around 8 years and was OIE designated expert for the virus. So it's a virus that is close to my heart, and it's a virus that obviously we all need to be worried about going forward. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today with a Caribbean slant. African swine fever virus, a real and present global threat, and reflect on should we be worried here in the Caribbean. So let me just try to move this on now. It doesn't seem to want to move on. Excuse me for 1 second. Let me try. Oh, just bear with me. There's so many knobs and bobs and things on this. Oh,
you just had 10 minutes.
I just have to click. I just have to click on the slide. It's as easy as that. Okay, apologies for that. So what I'm going to talk today is about the virus and the disease. So you understand a little bit more about that. Also the current global situation, which is very worrying, why we are struggling to control the disease around the world. Also, what always comes up is questions about vaccination, why we haven't got one. So I'll address a little bit about the prospects for vaccination, future risks, especially in this Caribbean region, and what next. So at the top of this slide, you'll see an article that I wrote actually in the Veterinary Record about 4 or 5 years ago, African swine fever virus on the move and dangerous. And boy, has this been proved to be true. And I talked in this article a little bit about how the virus was very, very high risk to move around and probably eventually get to China, and how serious this would be for the global pork markets and pigs generally around the world. So this has proved true, as we have a very, very serious situation on our hands now. And why are we all so worried? What's all the fuss about? Well, of course, we have an extremely nasty disease that causes very high mortality in pigs, which is not nice for anybody. But one of the main reasons is, of course, global trade, and the fact that people spend so much money exporting pork around the world. And you can see from the figures here how large these figures are. In 2017, 4.6 billion in the USA, and Belgium and Poland, 1.4 and 1.1 billion. They currently both have African swine fever virus circulating. And of course, many other countries around the world like Germany, Denmark, France, who are very close to African swine fever virus now. And of course, why are we all so worried as well is because China, as many of you know, produces over half of the world's pork. And although a lot of this is consumed in the local market, it does export pork products as well. So that was why we were so worried about this virus actually coming into China. And I'll talk about that more when I talk about the global situation. So introducing this fascinating virus, as you can see on the right, it's a large double-stranded DNA virus, extremely large, extremely complicated with many, many proteins, as you can see from all these arrows below, about 165 different proteins, and it's extremely tough. This makes it extremely difficult for us to get rid of this virus when it comes when it occasionally comes out of Africa, like it does and has done many times in the past actually, and spreads. So you can see from this figure, especially on the right-hand side, you can see Africa, and you can see the different colours on these little circles, and these reflect the different genotypes of African swine fever virus, the different types of the virus. And as you can see, most of the variation occurs in eastern and southern Africa. And this, as I'll talk about in a second, is all about the virus circulating in warthog burrows between soft ticks and warthogs. But as you can see, as in the green on the left-hand side, this particular genotype, genotype 1, has moved up into Europe and across into the Americas and across into Caribbean countries, as many of you guys will know, up in Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. The virus has spread, and there was a big outbreak in the Iberian Peninsula here, which took around 30 years to eradicate from Spain and Portugal. It also, in the meantime, spread up to Belgium and Holland with some infected pig meat that was taken up probably by tourists, and it's still present in Sardinia in Italy. So we've seen this virus spread all the way across to the Americas as well. But what happened in 2007 was quite interesting, was the virus from down here in Madagascar and Mozambique came up in some infected pork meat. And it came up through the Suez Canal, up through the Suez Canal, Red Sea, Suez Canal, and came through the Black Sea and the ship docked in the port of Poti in Georgia. And the pork meat was moved off the boat and then fed to local pigs in the area, and it spread very dramatically. And I was actually head of the African Swine Fever Virus Reference Laboratory at that time in the UK, and the head of Animal Services in Georgia phoned me up, and he said that we're seeing pigs actually dying, many pigs dead in fields, and people are throwing the pigs in the rivers, and they're floating down the rivers. And I talked to him about the clinical signs and what was happening, and I said to him, you really need to get samples as quick as possible to us, because it sounds like African swine fever virus. And surely it was, and it had spread at that stage to many countries in the Caucasus. As I've said many times before, the horse had bolted before the door was shut, and this was a problem. So talking a little bit about the disease itself, it's a disease that affects macrophages and endothelial cells. And endothelial cells, as you know, are the cells that surround the capillaries and the blood vessels. And when these are compromised, you get leakage of blood. So you get hemorrhage and edema. So it's associated with blood, transmitted in blood, and it causes hemorrhage, severe hemorrhage and edema. And this is some of the pictures that that came out of Malta in 1978, where nearly all the pigs, I think all the pigs actually on the island, had to be slaughtered because of the African swine fever outbreak. And our colleagues in the Caribbean as well will know how horrible this disease was when it affected some of the northern Caribbean countries. So recognizing African swine fever virus, I would say, is relatively easy, although at the start of an outbreak it can be confused with other viruses like PRRS and like classical swine fever virus. So really what happens at the start is you get loss of appetite, recumbency, fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and you get bloody diarrhea, you get blood coming out with all these the feces and the vomit, and then you get skin hemorrhages appearing, and these happen progressively. And when you open up these pigs that have African swine fever virus, you see enormous hemorrhage, really serious hemorrhage in all of the organs. And I'll show you some pictures now of this. These are some pigs at the start of an African swine fever outbreak. So they're doing what pigs do. They huddle at this stage. And then what you see is progressive hemorrhage, usually affecting the extremities, starts on the ears and then goes to the snout. And then it extends all the way over the pig. So you get hemorrhage all the way across the pig. But it doesn't always show itself in this way. When you open up the pig, the first thing you'll see is a very large spleen wrapped around the top of the abdomen. And you'll see the lymph nodes, or most of the lymph nodes, these ones here are the gastrohepatic lymph nodes. And as you can see, they've lost all their structure and they've become basically blood clots. You can see them here. If you feel these, they're just like blood. They haven't got any structure of lymph nodes. You see hemorrhages on the other organs, on the kidneys. And here you see this very, very large friable spleen, which has lost all its structure. And if you put your finger on it, it will actually go straight into it. It's completely friable. You get hemorrhages on the heart. You get hemorrhages in the gut. And I have to say at this stage that not all isolates or not all strains of African swine fever viruses are highly virulent. When a virus is circulated in a population for a long period of time, like is happening in Europe now and Russia now, and like happened in the Iberian Peninsula, you get changes in viruses. Viruses tend to change over time, and they attenuate in their virulence. They become less virulent. So they go from high virulence to moderate virulence and sometimes to low virulence. And when you see these low and moderate virulent isolates circulating, you can see these kind of lesions on the joints. You get swelling of the joints, you get bacterial infection, they're very lame. And this can also kill the pigs, and they obviously are very sick with this as well. So you see different clinical syndromes according to the virulence of the virus. So just to tell you briefly what happened over the period, I talked about in 2007 what happened when the virus appeared in Georgia from Africa. It then spread out of control. It then spread up into Russia. There were various outriders, various long-distance spreads that occurred, and these were mostly snuffed out. And this was human traffic. This was often army people taking pig products with them and then feeding it to local pigs when they got up to wherever they were going, and then you got a spread of the virus. But what happened then between 2007 and 2016-17 was the virus spread in this massive area here, which is a large area of the Russian Federation and Eastern Europe, including countries of Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, Poland. And there was the virus basically became endemic in the wild boar populations in these areas. Wild boars are equally susceptible to to African swine fever virus, so they die. But of course, they don't respect boundaries, so they're spreading the virus across these areas. And this contact between wild boar and backyard pigs is really critical in the spread of the virus. So we're seeing over many years the spread of this virus. It just wasn't going away. It was becoming endemic, and it was spreading from year to year, probably through frozen carcasses of wild boar that were infected with African swine fever virus at the start of the winter. Then they were frozen, and the next season when they defrosted, the virus was present in them, and of course were investigated by wild boar and probably maybe nibbled at by wild boars and smelled by wild boars, and they spread the virus on. And what we saw in 2017 was the virus spreading, as you can see these blue dots, across eastwards in Russia. And we were really starting to worry about this virus spreading long distance when we saw this, because we saw it on the border of Mongolia. And of course, we were really worried about China at this stage. So yes, it happened in August 2018, just a few weeks ago. We were informed about that the virus had spread for the first time into China. And you can see here in very large areas of China, there were outbreaks. At this stage, the first outbreaks, there were just a few, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 approximately, but this has spread since then. The other thing that was happening at the same time just a few weeks ago was this red period, this red splodge here. This is the virus moving down into Romania, where hundreds and hundreds of outbreaks were occurring in domestic, in backyard and domestic pigs, and some outbreaks in wild boar. That was the blue ones. And we knew that Romania was extremely at risk because of the nature of the terrain, the nature of the fact they had lots of wild boar there, and the nature of the fact that there were lots of backyard pigs there. And it's the combination of backyard pigs and wild boar and the connections between the two that tend to spread the virus. So this is actually going on as we speak, this really big outbreak in Romania. It's also moved down into Bulgaria. So lots and lots of outbreaks in this area. China was obviously the worry that we had, that the virus was getting there. partly because we knew China was extremely susceptible, because again, the ecological situation in China is very prone to lots of wild boar being present, and they have so many pigs. And as you can see here, from August the 3rd to September the 6th, we saw many outbreaks occurring, as you can see with the red dots here, on the 6th of September. But since then, the virus, this is yesterday, the 26th of September, as you can see, it spread further up towards Mongolia, and there have been quite a few more outbreaks. So you can see from this, as in yesterday, the large amount of China that is now infected with African swine fever virus. And the problem is in China, or is likely the virus was moved in by people from Russia, and also likely it was probably brought in the spring. So it's probably been incubating and spreading for quite a few months, like it did in Georgia. Again, the horses bolted before the door was shut. So I'm afraid, sadly, expecting a lot more outbreaks to occur in China, and it may remain endemic in China for many years to come. It's going to be extremely difficult to get rid of that because of the nature of the farming, the backyard farming there, and the fact that it's already spread to such a large geographical location. You can see here by the red, this is where there are very large amounts of pigs in China, and this is where the virus is currently in China. And this statistic is quite alarming. The amount of live pigs sold by these 6 provinces, in fact there are 7 provinces now since I made this slide just a few days ago, that have been infected. There are 175, and this will be more, million pigs that are nationally sold live in 2017. You can see the amount of pigs that they have in this area. Many of these pigs are backyard, extensively produced pigs. So then, just a week or so ago, with the virus spread, had a big jump from the Czech Republic, where it was found in wild boar, to the first time in Western Europe, in Belgium, where it was found in around 9 wild boar in this little area on the south of Belgium, on the border between Luxembourg and France. This is an area which is very forested, as you can see here, the Forest d'Orval here, the Bois de Stockem. These are all very forested areas with lots and lots of wild boar in these areas. So Belgium, of course, are extremely worried. Germany are very worried. France are very worried, because wild boar can just go over these borders without any problems. And it was probably brought up by humans, again, that came up and maybe picnicked in the area, left their sandwiches, left their pork, and in came the wild boar and gobbled it up and got the virus. It might have come from Romania and Bulgaria, where, as I showed you, the virus is really spreading very severely at the moment. So Belgium are obviously putting in lots of measures. They've already planned to kill 4,000 pigs in this area. Luckily, there aren't too many domestic pigs in this area because it's a forested area. And they're looking towards trying to control the virus. But the problem is, once you have the virus in your wild boar populations, it's very difficult to get hold of. If you try to go and then hunt out all the wild boar, you will tend to move them. They will tend to run away, as they do when they tend to hear gunshots, and they move into other areas. So it's a very, you have to be very careful about how you go about trying to stop wild boar or cull wild boar during an African swine fever virus outbreak. Okay, so I always have to talk about, because it's very important that you understand just for one slide about this is an African virus. As you saw from the picture in Africa, this virus has been present in Africa for probably hundreds or thousands of years. And this is where all the action occurs in Africa, in the warthog burrows, as I said, transmission between these soft ticks here and warthogs. And none of these show clinical signs, so they're all very happy. And these soft ticks are absolutely amazing animals in the fact that they can be infected by African swine fever virus, and they can then keep that virus in their system for over 5 years. And they can also go for over 5 years without a blood meal. And this makes it, as you can imagine, extremely difficult to control, because they're what's called nidicolous or nest building ticks. They go into little crevices, they go into dark areas. So what happened in Spain is is they have these ticks in Spain. And so these ticks were obviously were feeding on African swine fever virus infected pigs. And then they went off into crevices in the pig houses. And then they removed all the pigs, they culled all the pigs, and then left the pig houses barren for around 5 years. But even 5 years later, when they put new pigs in, these little ticks, they smelt the pigs, they came out of the little holes that they'd been hiding in that hadn't been disinfected and they hadn't been got to. They came out, they fed off the new pigs that had come in, and they transmitted the virus. This really proves how difficult it is when you have a reservoir host like this holding the virus in the environment, and being able to survive for such a long period of time with the virus in it. And these ticks are not just confined to Africa, and this is the problem that we have in other countries. So now talking a little bit about how the virus is transmitted, and this is a slide that I pinched off the internet from Wageningen. I can never pronounce that, in Holland anyway. Thank you very much to the guys there, because it's an excellent slide, which really shows how this virus is transmitted, which is really critical to how you control it and the risk factors that countries have as regards getting it. As I said, its transmission is associated with the blood. So it's not so easily transmitted. It's not as easily transmitted as, say, foot and mouth disease or PRRS or something like that, which is aerosol infected. This virus is transmitted to blood, so it's a little bit more like Ebola virus would be. So you have to have quite close direct contact. So it's a bit of a slow burner, and this hinders rapid diagnosis, because people think African swine fever virus is going to kill all the pigs in 8 days. And everything's going to be carnage, but it's not like that. It sometimes doesn't even pass from pen to pen unless there's been quite close contact. So it is highly infectious, but it's a slow burner. It starts off slowly, and this is probably what they're seeing in China now. So it's transmitted in domestic pigs. It's transmitted many ways. By direct contact through domestic pigs, on materials, in boots, in lorries, fomites, through vets, through pig workers. It can be transmitted, and this is critical, through feed, through kitchen waste, food residues and meat products, because it's such a tough virus. It's able to survive for very long period of times in partially cooked, in cured, in smoked pork meat. It's really, really tough virus. So this is an easy way that it can be transmitted across, especially large distances across borders. It can also be transmitted if the soft tick is present, as I've explained to you. And this transmission here between wild boar or wild or feral pigs and the domestic pigs is so critical, because it comes in from the wild into the domestic population, often through contact between wild boar and domestic pigs. And wild boar can be obviously infected from other wild boar, that they suffer from the disease in the same way as domestic pigs do, and their carcass is full of virus, and they tend to investigate carcasses, eat carcasses, sometimes smell carcasses, which can easily transmit the virus. Again, materials, especially from hunters moving about, they can have the virus on their boots if they don't disinfect properly. Again, feed is critical because of the fact that the virus is so tough, and of course soft ticks. So you can see the whole transmission cycle and how the virus is transmitted both to domestic pigs and wild boar, and between the two here. So there are key risk factors that are involved. And these really emphasize why control is proving so challenging for this virus. So, of course, there's contact between wild boar and backyard feral pigs, which is transmitting the virus between the two. Of course, biosecurity is critical, and a lack of biosecurity. When people get African swine fever virus, especially in countries where there's not enough compensation produced, people get very nervous, they get very frightened, they do things they wouldn't normally do. Like they send the pigs to market, like they throw the pigs down in the rivers, they will panic. And this happens all around the world because it's such a horrible virus. So the other thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is surviving swine and how they can become carriers. And this is really important to what's happening at the moment and why the virus is proving so difficult to control. There's also long-distance movement, as I've talked about, and wild boar can in some cases move long distances, especially when they're pushed out by hunting. There's, of course, the presence of the ticks, which we have to talk about, and then there's the catering waste cycles, cured, smoked and raw hams, and the fact that humans transmit these pork products and take these pork products with them when they go abroad. They're often delicacies, and people from countries will often take a piece of smoked or a piece of cured pork to their family, maybe in another country, because it's a delicacy and they really want it. We all know that from when we visited Spain and their beautiful pork products. But pork products are produced in a lot of parts of the world, which are real delicacies. Okay, so just moving quickly through the risk factors. I've talked a little bit about this, the role of the wild boar. As you can see for this big circle here, this is where now African swine fever virus is present in a lot of this area, moved all the way down here into Romania. And as you can see, as you move westwards, you see the darker colors, the red colors, and this is where the wild boar are. And so this is really dangerous when you're moving. It's moving into this area because it will become endemic in this wild boar populations. You're looking also at backyard low biosecurity pigs, and again, the redder, the darker, the more low biosecurity backyard pigs, and you can see these are in the same areas as you see the wild boar. And this combination of wild boar and low biosecurity pigs really does cause problems, the contact and the connections between the two. And you can see these areas at the moment, especially down in Romania and Bulgaria and eastern Ukraine and western Ukraine and western Poland. There are lots and lots of low biosecurity backyard pigs and lots of wild boar as well. So the third risk factor is what's happening and what happens, what viruses do is they change. Viruses adapt in an environment, and this is exactly what the African swine fever virus, this one genotype 2, which originally probably when it went up into Georgia was highly virulent, 100% mortality. Over the past 11 years, that virus has changed. And there are new viruses appearing in the population that have different, what we call phenotypes. They have different virulence levels, and there is evidence from some beautiful work that's being done by the European Community Reference Laboratory in Madrid, in Spain, and the Russian groups, showing that there are evidence for moderate and low virulent strains that are appearing in the population. So like a cocktail of viruses is appearing, some high, some low, some moderate. And when you get that kind of situation, you get animals surviving the infection. So when you get animals surviving an infection, we know from lots of work that's been done in the past, when you get animals surviving from African swine fever virus, they are capable of carrying the virus for long periods of time, sometimes up to months. So when you get this situation, obviously you get carrier animals, you get a lot more challenges in controlling the virus, because those carrier animals they're at risk to the food chain, obviously, and they can also transmit the virus for longer periods of time to both other pigs and other wild boar. So these are some of the papers here showing the evidence, for example, of high and moderately virulent viruses and a reduction in the pathogenicity of the virus. And there's also evidence that quite a significant portion of domestic pigs and wild boar are being found that are antibody positive. That means they're surviving the infection. Obviously, the next one, and the really important one, especially for the Caribbean region, is the role of humans. Humans transmit the virus around with them, and especially the long distances we've seen in Belgium and Russia and China, and when it was transmitted to the Caribbean many years ago. This was through human contact. It was actually through airline waste. But as I said earlier, there's a lack of information for farmers and hunters. There's sometimes low levels of compensation. This means that people dispose of dead pigs in rivers because it costs to dispose of them. They sell pigs in the face of an outbreak. They move sick pigs to market, which is, of course, a real issue. They will feed pigs swill, which could be infected with the virus. And then there's humans through vehicle contamination, through clothes contamination, vets, farm workers and hunters. It was vets that spread the virus in Belgium from farm to farm when it got there through a piece of pork being brought up from Spain. It was vets that then passed it on and spread it to other farms. Obviously, biosecurity, poor levels of biosecurity is critical, and also flies have been shown to be able to transmit the virus mechanically. And finally, obviously ticks. I've talked about these guys and how amazing they are at maintaining the virus in the environment. We do have ornithodorus, these soft ornithodorus ticks in many parts of the world. These are mubata here, these pink ones. They're present all over Africa, where in warthogs, and they spread, as I've explained, spread between warthogs and the virus spreads between warthogs and soft ticks. But there are other species like Erraticus up into Spain and Portugal and around North and Western Africa, and species of Ornithodorus spread all the way across here and probably into China. So this is a real worry if we've got ticks here as well that are able to transmit the virus. At the moment where the virus is, there's no evidence for these ticks present, but you do get these Ornithodorus ticks in other parts of the world, including America, and maybe possibly in the Caribbean region as well. We need to do a lot more work to look for these ticks and understand where they are. So the main challenges we face, as I've discussed, is a very resistant virus. It's a very complex virus, multiple genotypes. Although we have only one genotype circulating that I've talked about today, there are another 23 that have no cross protection that are circulating in Africa waiting to come out. It's present in domestic and wild swine, and of course when you have something in wild swine, it causes so many issues and challenges with control. The signs and symptoms can be confused, especially early on with other diseases. There are reservoirs of infections present, and we have to be especially worried about these ticks. There are carrier animals, because now the virus is attenuating and able to spread through carrier animals, which is a new dimension to this virus in Europe and to this outbreak, which has to be taken into consideration. There's a lack of effective vaccines, which I'll discuss just now. And of course, there's rapid and uncontrolled spread in developing countries. So the virus is spreading there all the time, especially in Africa. So one of the questions people ask is, why no vaccine for ASF? Well, the sad thing is it's very easy to produce. Well, the good thing is it's very easy to produce vaccines against some viruses. They're very simple and easy, and they have a simple immune response, neutralizing antibodies. But some other viruses, it's very, very difficult. And I'm afraid African swine fever virus is a difficult one. It's as I've said, it's a large and complex virus with up to 165 proteins. And all the efforts to find vaccines have been already tried. The easy ways, like inactivating or attenuating and passaging the virus, they don't work. Many collaborative groups, many ASF groups, certainly in UK and Spain, especially, have been looking at viral candidates. They've been looking at viral proteins. They've been using multiple proteins. They've been looking at viral epitopes. They've been doing all sorts of using combinations of proteins and epitopes to try to identify vaccines, putting them into marker to other viruses. They've been using all the common techniques that people use, trying to identify as many immunogenic proteins as possible, and they basically haven't found a vaccine that is protective. So work is still on, but as I said at the start, many of the viral proteins, many of those 165 proteins haven't been, we still don't understand what they do. Vaccine trials require high containment facilities, they're expensive, so people haven't, on the whole, been working on African swine fever virus in the past. Few groups have worked on it. The USA stopped working on African swine fever virus research for many years because they didn't think it was a threat. And of course, commercial vaccine companies don't see a big market. So the bottom line is we do need more research. So just moving on to my last few slides, which is more focusing on the Caribbean region and should we be worried? And as I talked to a group of Americans last week, the answer is yes, because the more the virus is circulating around the world, and I've told you how it's circulating in such a large quantities in Europe and now in China, the more risk there is that the virus comes to us because of these human elements. So it's spreading around the world in many countries. It's causing high levels of mortality, which is worrying. We know that evidence that the virus may be attenuating or is attenuating in the field, so you get carrier animals. We know it's an extremely tough virus, so it's in processed meat, so it can be bought in and has been bought in the past frequently by people. So I call this a sandwich effect, but many people are coming to the Caribbean from infected regions now, even more infected regions, So more chance that the virus might be coming in, which we need to be worried about. And of course, a vaccine is not in sight, so we cannot do anything about it if it comes in, apart from test and slaughter, where hundreds of thousands and possibly millions of pigs might have to be slaughtered. The risk factors to assess in the Caribbean are obviously this connection between backyard, outdoor and wild pigs, which is pretty critical, and the biosecurity levels. It's all about biosecurity. Stopping the virus getting access to these wild pigs is not easy if people come in with a sandwich or come in with a piece of pork. We need to understand about these ornithodoros ticks, and critically whether they have contact with pigs, because many of the ornithodoros ticks do feed off birds, and of course the habitats of birds are very different to the habitats of pigs. So if you have ornithodoros ticks around the place in the Caribbean, but they're only feeding off birds, they're not a worry. Even if they are capable of transmitting to pigs, there's not going to be any contact. Obviously, the levels of biosecurity on domestic pig farms, we need to up our game on that, because, and I'll talk about that specifically in my last slide. Border security. There is undoubtedly illegal and legal imports of pig and pig products and possibly feed from abroad, which needs to be controlled as much as possible, because there is now an increased risk that some of these products might be infected with the virus. And critically, rapid and accurate laboratory diagnosis is essential, as did not happen and has not happened in various countries. As I've talked about the horse bolting before the door's been shut, you need rapid and accurate diagnosis to be able to rapidly control the disease. The virus is only a very short flight or boat ride away. So the advice to pig farmers specifically is they need to review and increase existing levels of biosecurity on the farm. It's all about biosecurity, biosecurity, biosecurity. And it's based around people on the whole bringing pig meat products, pig products onto farms, such as workers, and ensuring that visitors have not had recent contact with affected areas, and anybody returning from affected areas should avoid contact with domestic pigs. So basically, we're looking at stopping the viruses coming into our countries, one, but if they do come into our countries in pig meat, we're looking at stopping them spreading into our domestic pigs and into our wild pigs. So people across the Caribbean, especially farmers, need to familiarize themselves with the clinical signs of ASF, and they need to report any suspicious illnesses immediately. So my time is up now. I have 37 minutes. Apologies for my 2 minutes over the time. I hope this has been useful. I think we do need to be worried about this virus. I'm not just a scientist who's worked on African swine fever virus trying to big up their virus like some people do. I think it is really important that we understand that this virus is spreading. It's not going to be controlled in many countries, or it's going to be extremely difficult to control in many of these big countries, especially China. We do have people coming from these countries who are likely to bring products with them that could be infected with the viruses, so our pigs are in danger, so we need to up our game. Thank you very much to UE, of course, where I work now, to the Purbright Institute, where I spent around 15 years of my working career working on African swine fever virus, and also to the guys at the European Union Reference Laboratory in Spain, my friends there, who I had the chance to talk to at length about what was going on in a conference that I went to a couple of weeks ago, and these guys are always really helpful. So thank you very much, and I'd be very happy to take some questions if I can sort out the IT. Thank you. So maybe Jennifer, you could take over as and say something, and then we can go straight on to questions. I hope everybody heard that.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think it was very interesting to have such a review of the virus. And I think now everybody is kind of frightened. As you said, it needs to be the case. Find solution, we understand. So just to add some information that I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, the coordination unit discussed about the situation, and it is when we suggested to have the webinar organized, and I thank very much Chris for doing that. And we started to brainstorm, and tomorrow the Swine Disease Working Group is going to meet also following this webinar to discuss already the initiatives that are ongoing in the countries and strategize as a region on what we can do. So Chris, you mentioned the diagnostic is essential, biosecurity and stuff like that. So we are going to try to see what we can do to help the countries prevent virus introduction. And I think it's really good if the participant can ask burning questions to Chris, because the quality of the webinar is just excellent despite the weather.
I'll just address a question that was mentioned in the chat about the peccary, which of course is the wild pig that we have here in the Caribbean. I'm not sure how many countries have it, but obviously the work has not been done to look to see exactly how susceptible the peccary would be, but my bet would be almost 100% that it would be highly susceptible to African swine fever virus, and it would have the same susceptibility of domestic pigs. So yes, it would be it would potentially contribute towards spreading the virus if it did come to the Caribbean. So please feel free to take off your mute, which you can control yourself, and ask a question if you like, and I'll do my best to answer it. Yes, okay, I have another question here about the carrier state. And do recovered pigs actually excrete the virus? It's a very, very good question. There's a lot of work being done in this area, looking at the ability of pigs to excrete the virus, and the answer to your question is a lot more work needs to be done, but a lot of experimental studies point towards it. Yes, it does, and it can excrete the virus up to, in some cases, 60 or 90 days after infection. So this is a potential worry that it can actually excrete the virus. I can answer any of the questions on the chat as well if you want to write it in there. Let me just have a look. Where is the nearest laboratory? Okay. Yes, this is another important question about laboratory capacity. I'm going to be setting up African swine fever virus molecular real-time PCR in my lab here, but it won't be ISO 17025 accredited because we don't have that accreditation in place at the moment. I'm not sure whether the guys up in Cuba have a facility, but my bet is that the nearest laboratory may be the USA. I can also vouch for the lab that I worked on in many years in Pirbright. Of course, they do routine testing for anybody who has any problems, any testing they need to do on pigs they may think they're worried about. They can send them to OIE reference laboratories around the world, and the OIE reference laboratories around the world, there's one in South Africa, there's one in Spain, and there's one in Pirbright. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether there is one in the States, but I think certainly guys on the call would say, I'm sure there are labs that now are setting up African swine fever virus tests in the USA. The problem is with the USA is they, as I said to you, they stopped working on African swine fever virus for many, many years because they didn't see it as a threat. So they didn't allow any virus almost in the country. And now, of course, they're catching up. And I know Kansas is doing some great work, and they're coming back into the field and working on vaccine design, which is great because we need as many experts as possible working on it. So does the DR does not have any direct flights from China? How do we have many flights coming from? However, yeah, okay. Well, there is a risk from Russia. It's been present in Russia since around 2007. Russia are reporting, as far as we know, outbreaks, and they do have periodic outbreaks. And the problem is it is spreading in wild boar. So there is a risk that people might bring virus in from Russia. How do flies transmit the virus? The virus is transmitted mechanically by flies. They're not a definitive host like they're not a biological host like the ticks. So basically, the flies obviously go on the carcasses that have loads and loads of virus and blood coming out of their system, and they take the virus on their proboscis and they move to another animal and transmit the virus. Do any islands have direct flights from China or Eastern Europe? Speaking from Trinidad, no, we don't have any direct flights from China. But I'm not sure about others. Of course, the trouble is with these particular products, they can be actually put in a bag almost, and because they're smoked or cured, they're pretty much the product as they are, although they haven't been cooked to 70 degrees or 80 degrees. So these can be taken from country to country before they get here, in some cases. Let me have a look. Are there any more? I've done that one. Oh, hang on, I'm going down. Do flies transmit the virus? Okay. I think I've addressed all the questions that are on the chat. Yes, the webinar is recorded, so I'll send the recording up to Jennifer. And we can put it on the website. Should we request ASF in differentials when sent? Yes, well, absolutely. The only way, so the question is, should we request African swine fever in differentials when sending samples for CSF and maybe PRRS? The answer is, if you're seeing these kind of symptoms that you do get with some more virulent strains of CSF, you can only tell the difference through laboratory diagnosis. And now we've got these sort of lower virulent or less virulent strains circulating. It does complicate matters a bit. What the question I asked immediately to the guys in Georgia when they phoned me up was, have you vaccinated against CSF? And the pigs that were dying, are the pigs that are dying vaccinated against CSF? And the answer was yes. And that immediately made me worry, because as we know, we've got pretty good vaccines against CSF. So if you do vaccinate against CSF and you're seeing clinical signs that maybe hemorrhages, the sorts of things I've shown, then certainly you want to think about ASF in your diagnosis. Please check the following publications. I haven't got that, but yes, I will check it when I get it. Are there any more questions you'd like me to address at all? If you have any other questions, you've got my email address. It was, I think it was on the last slide, or you've got my email address. Please feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to address any specific questions that you have related to this.
Thank you.
Do you know any research being conducted on ASF in the region? As far as I know, there is no research being carried out in the region. I'm afraid it's because, of course, getting the virus into the region to be able to work on it is extremely challenging. Understandably, countries don't want to allow the virus to come in. The Transboundary Emerging Diseases 2018, I think, I'm not sure, I think I've probably seen that one, but yes, that will, I'm not, that might be the one with the Chinese article where they've done some genotyping and they've looked at the outbreak in China, and that was indeed the article when they predicted that the virus had been present in China a lot, had entered China a lot earlier than was being said at the time, possibly in the spring. Where CSF is endemic, how prepare for ASF. Yeah, well, you know, where it's endemic, I mean, like, for example, in Cuba and places like that, CSF it has a varying amount of symptoms. So sometimes you won't see classic hemorrhage. And I know the virus at the moment circulating in Cuba is pretty low virulent. So if ASF does come in, it's likely to come in as a highly virulent virus affecting naive pigs. So you're likely to see it. So I think the likelihood is if it did come in, you would see it, you would see clear symptoms that would make you worried about that this was something different than what you have in CSF at the moment. But that you have to remember that they can look the same, these two viruses, and so the only way you can actually definitively differentiate them is through laboratory. Through laboratory tests, but they are, of course, completely different viruses. So if you both happen to be unlucky and you were endemic with CSF and ASF came in, you would probably see quite a marked difference in the clinical signs that you saw. But they could be infected with both viruses at the same time if you were really unlucky. We need to consider international garbage and cruises. Yes, I'm afraid so. I mean, you see, as I said earlier, if it was a sort of piece of pork that was raw, by the time it sort of got over a certain distance, you know, it'd be starting to smell, and people would probably throw it into the sea or something like that. But the problem, I suppose, and maybe it's a bit hypothetical, but I think it is a possibility, not necessarily as high risk as others, is people will bring smoked to cured pork products into like a cruise ship, or the cruise ship might either, you have to be careful. Obviously, the cruise ships would have SOPs, and they would be very careful about what one would hope, what sort of meat, or the progeny of their meat, where it came from, etc. But the people on the boats could possibly bring on cured or smoked meat, and then when they come off the ships, that could possibly come off. So this is how it was brought on. It's been spread around the world, like foot and mouth disease has been spread around the world on boats as well. I think it is important to see that there is a risk if people are coming from these infected countries, or the ships are coming from these infected countries in some cases, that there's that any risk of them bringing infected products, either individually or on the cruise itself, or through food being bought on the cruise ship itself, that we try to stop that happening. Yes. Okay. So lots of great questions. Thank you very much for those questions. Really great questions. If that's all the questions, as I said, please feel free to contact me if you have any more questions. And so, with Jennifer's permission, and I'd like to say thank you very much for joining this webinar. And please feel free to send the link to anybody else who you think might be interested in hearing it. And hopefully we'll meet soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. And the other participants, we will put on the ASF webpage of CaribVET the new materials as they come in. So feel free to go there. And if you need anything specific, like a forum or something that you think is interesting we put into place, please let us know so we organize accordingly. Thank you very much.